Good evening, all. Welcome to Audit and Governance Committee, 1st of September today. This is an in-person meeting. The meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. A recording of the public part of the meetings will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. Members and officers, please remember to switch the microphone on when speaking and off when finished, and speak directly into the microphone. Remote participants joining by Teams, please use the hands up button to indicate you have a question or comment. Those joining by Teams, please turn your cameras on when you're speaking and off when finished. In-person attendees, please switch off your mobile phones or place on silent mode. Any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Burnett, and also Councillor Chavira is saying we'll be running late this evening.
Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. Members have chance to read it out. I agree with that. Thank you. Any disclosure of interest?
On that I'm aware of, Chair.
Any urgent business?
Again, non-Chair.
Agenda item 6. Any references from committees and other bodies?
Non-Chair.
Move to agenda item 7. Shared anti-fraud service report. Nick, I think you represent. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. The report can be found at page 12 of your bundle, and it's to review and note the progress of the shared anti-fraud service on the plan previously agreed. I'm just going to go through the highlights and then open myself up to questions, because the report itself is quite short and concise. From page 12 onwards, it sets out the background to the report. The progress and the delivery of the anti-fraud plan starts at page 13. So far, 107 referrals have been made in the current period, the majority in volume relating to housing benefit and council tax issues. Currently, there are 99 live cases open, and we carried forward 115 cases from the previous financial year. The trend in referrals is generally down, but this results also in a positive downward trend in the estimated loss, and that's detailed at page 18. By way of comparison, at page 19, there is the loss and savings of the 29 cases that have been investigated and closed so far in this period. Paragraphs 22 and 23 deal with an update in respect of the housing tenancy fraud. So far in this period, 3 properties have been recovered back into stock belonging to the council and reallocated to people on the housing waiting list, and a further 1 property was recovered from a social housing provider within the borough, and that also has gone to someone from the housing waiting list. A total of 78 right to buy reviews have been conducted. That's 100% of those made in the period, which, as per the report, 2 have been prevented from going to the right to buy through intervention. As today, I can add a further 1 to that 2. So in total, so far this year, 3 right to buys have been prevented as a result of our activity. An additional piece of work in respect of rent accounts is detailed at paragraph 24, which has resulted in improved management of the rent accounts and reduces the council's exposure to risk in that area. In respect of the National Fraud Initiative, council officers have been supported in the upload of substantial data sets, and all of these have been completed on time, ready for the output to be received in February and March, and that's a big thanks from us for the cooperation from all the different teams across the council that's supported Audit in putting in those data sets. A series of appendices follow this update report for your review, and I'm happy at this time to take any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Neil. Any questions, please? Yeah, Councillor Chairman.
Just here, our normal one, full-time staff. Are we okay on the staffing? Are we struggling on keeping people for? It's we have it every year, but it's just one because obviously we're paying for it. And the other one was training courses that you run. Is there any issues with council departments or particular departments not attending that training? So those are my two questions. Thank you.
I'll take the easy one first, which is the last. No, we get a very good uptake, and we're currently in a round of anti-money laundering training, which has been very well attended, I'm pleased to say, with thanks to the audit team for helping us getting that up and running. In the earlier question, I think it's a current fact of life that just about everywhere is suffering recruitment. I can say that we did have some issues a few months ago. We are back up to 3 full-time investigators and a intelligence team member. So that has hampered some of the progress, but with us all back up to full strength, I'm hoping that things will progress that much better in the next or the final quarter of the year. There also have been some more complex investigations which needed some priority and some extra resource. So other cases may have been delayed because of that as well. So we've spread ourselves as far across the piece as we possibly can without interrupting service delivery.
Thank you, Chair. Any more questions? No. Thank you for your report, Neil. So we need to
recommendations.
Can I ask the committee recommendation, the activity of the shared anti-fraud services and the progress made in delivering the 2022 and 23 anti-fraud plan? Agree, yeah? Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Can I move to item agenda 8, is corporate risk update, and 9 them together, I think. Concha, can you take together, please? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. The first report on the corporate risks update. This is to provide an update on the authority's corporate risks and the risk management work being undertaken. The recommendation for the committee is to review the updated corporate risk register. If I can take you through the key parts of the report, please. Paragraph 3 to 6 of the report provides some background on the Council's risk management strategy, the training which is available to both members and staff, and the regular review and monitoring of the risks by risk owners, the internal governance group, CLMT, and this committee. Paragraph 7 to 9 of the report details the approach taken by the Council using the 4x4 risk matrix to assess both the likelihood and the impact of the risk occurring, consideration of controls, and the 4 T's strategies which can be used to manage the risk, which includes the tolerate, terminate, treat and transfer. Paragraphs 10 to 12 of the report provide an update on the current position. There are currently 40 risks on the corporate risk register. Since the last update to this committee, the direction of travel for each risk has remained the same. The heat map at paragraph 11 plots the residual risk scores for each of those corporate risks based on the likelihood of that risk occurring and the impact on the Council in the event that it did occur. To provide an overview of the Council's risk landscape, the heat map shows that the greatest number of risks are currently assessed by the risk owners as medium high priority, and 6 of the risks have been assessed as high priority. These high priority risks are detailed in the table at paragraph 12, together with an update on the control measures in place. So these particular risks relate to failure to keep to the approved budget, failure to recruit and retain staff, the current demand profile, poverty in Luton, continuing to result in an overspend on the agreed budget, and this is mainly in relation to housing, failure to meet adult social care reform requirements. There are 2 particular risks associated with that. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Concha. Any questions? No. Can I ask for the recommendation? The committee is recommended to review the updated corporate risk register. Thank you. Can you carry on, Concha, for item 9? Thank you.
Thank you. The next report is an update on the work of the Internal Audit Service for the 6-month period 1st of April to the 30th of September 22. The recommendation for the committee is to receive the Internal Audit Plan update report and to note any significant issues which have been highlighted. If again, I can take you through the key parts of the audit report. Paragraph 6 explains that the audit plan is risk-based and it's prepared in consultation with management, including a review of risk registers and known areas of risk. The annual audit plan is agreed by CLMT and the Audit and Governance Committee, and it's intended to be indicative of the work which will be done during the year. The annual audit plan is resourced by calculating the number of chargeable days available within the team, and it's always based assuming that we have full complement of staff available. The number of set days for the 22-23 audit plan is 1,380 days. At the start of the financial year, we were 2 full-time equivalent vacant posts within the team, and we have successfully recruited to one of the principal auditor posts, but that has meant that her post is now vacant, so we are currently down 2 senior auditor posts at the moment. Since the internal recruitment, we have been re-advertising these vacancies, but we have been having difficulties in successfully appointing to those posts. So we've gone out to re-advert again, trying wider advertisement sources to try to kind of recruit the level and experienced staff that we need for the audit work that we would like to deliver. Our target is always to achieve 90% of the annual audit plan by the end of the financial year. And as I've explained, it's dependent on having a full complement of staff. As at the end of Q2, we completed 46% of the annual audit plan. However, during the last few weeks, in addition to having the 2 full-time equivalent vacant posts, we have also had a couple of members of staff off sick, and these have unfortunately turned into long-term sickness absence. So this does mean that as at the end of November, we have only achieved 56% of the audit plan. So I would like to highlight this to the committee at this stage, that due to the staffing issues within the team, it's unlikely that we'll achieve the 90% target by the end of the year. We are currently reviewing options available to us, which includes use of external resources, whether for some audit areas we can base assurance through use of internal control questionnaires, for example, or carry out high-level reviews instead of a full audit review. Our focus for the remaining year will be to focus on the key audit reviews, particularly the high risk areas identified in the audit plan, to ensure that we complete those areas of work which feed into the annual audit opinion. So that's just a verbal update to the report that you have in front of you in terms of the staffing issues and achievement of the audit plan there. If I can continue with the report. So between the 1st of April and the 30th of September, we have issued 18 final audit reports, and of those, 3 were issued with a limited assurance opinion. So this was to do with the IT governance audit review, housing and temporary accommodation rents, and bank reconciliation. Follow-ups will be due on those in approximately 6 months' time, and definitely by the end of the financial year, to provide you with an update in terms of how the individual service areas are implementing those recommendations. A summary of those audit findings for those particular reports are detailed in paragraph 12 onwards within the report. Paragraph 13 onwards within the report details the number of recommendations we have followed up in the year. So to date, we have followed up on 195 recommendations, of which 163 were medium or high priority. Of those, 56% have been fully implemented, 39% are in the process of being implemented, and 5% were yet to be implemented. And the reasons for those delays are detailed within Appendix C. I'm happy to take any questions on that report, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Katja. Any questions? Yeah, Underwood first, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Katja, said that you're not going to meet the target this year and you're reprioritising. Could you go through again how you're resetting those priorities?
Yes, of course. So within the audit plan, we have certain key areas within the audit plan, and what they are, they're theme-based. So we would have corporate governance, certain reviews linked with corporate governance, key financial systems, service-specific reviews, grant certification, and other types of work that we do. Within those individual audit areas that we've identified within the plan. We've risk prioritised them, so some of them would have been identified as high priority and some of them as a medium priority. So in order to kind of refocus those areas, we would focus on, for example, completing the corporate governance review, some of the cross-cutting reviews, the key financial controls, so all of those key areas which would feed into the head of audit's annual audit opinion. So we would kind of prioritise those areas. Some of those key financial control audits we've kind of complete on a cyclical basis. So we'll have a look at the last one to see, well, do we need to carry out the level of detail of review which we did last time, particularly if we gave it an above adequate assurance opinion and we're happy last time round, or if there's been any significant changes, then we would definitely do more detailed testing on those areas. So we would kind of have a look at that and refocus it. Our IT audit reviews are currently being carried out by Mazars at the moment, so they'll be done externally. And again, we're looking at other resources and other options available to see if we can purchase some, external resources to help us deliver some of those key areas of reviews.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the fact that we haven't met the target this year, does that have implications for the plan for next year?
So the plan is risk-based and it's always indicative of the work that we will carry out. So the areas which we do not cover this year, again, we'll have those conversations with the service directors and the corporate directors and see where we are with those. And certainly the high areas where we need to review, we would certainly carry those forward into next year.
Okay, so there's no risk of things backing up and the workload increasing.
So with that, we would have a look at all of the risks associated it, because it's focused on the risks. It could be because of some of those you'll notice from the plan have dropped out because of certain external reviews happening on those areas. So prior to carrying out those audit reviews, we would have that discussion with the service director and the relevant manager to discuss those areas. If there are some areas which we need to perhaps carry out next year, but there are other areas, again, we'll kind of prioritise those based on resources. And if it needs be, then we will get in additional resources so that there isn't a backlog as such. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor David, Chair.
Just a similar thing. I'm just checking on physical numbers. If I read it right, 8's a full quota in the audit team from the report. We're 2 light and you've got 2 on long-term sick. So you're at half basically, aren't you? Is that right?
Yes, that's right. We're
So
operating at half at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is that okay, David? Any other questions?
Just on the
Recommendation.
report we received, that's it.
Recommendations. The committee is recommended to receive the internal audit plan update, which covers the period 1st of April 2022 to 30 September 2022. Yeah. Moving agenda item 10, Treasury Management Half-Year Report. Half-year ended 30th September 2022. I think that's Dev. Oh, sorry,
John Charles.
Oh, John Jonas. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'll be happy to present this report this evening. As you say, it's the half mute. Oh, I've taken it off mute.
John, you are on the mute.
I will see. Is that better, colleagues? Hello, can you hear me?
John, do you want to try putting your headphones back on?
Hello? Is that
Yeah,
any?
mate.
Oh dear. Trying to work out what's gone wrong then.
We can't hear you.
No, okay.
Did you unmute it?
Yep, yeah. Trying to work out what's gone wrong. Hello? Is that better?
Ask Deb. We come back to you later. I just ask the Deb. He can reply.
Right. Sorry, Chair. I'll try to present that report if that's okay with John. John, if you can nod.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
So I'll try to yeah. Just bear with me, but I'm not prepared. It was John's report. So this is a 6 months review. So as based on our treasury management strategy, which get approved by the council in February, we have to do a 6 months review and we have to report back to the council and to the executive and to audit committee. So it's coming to audit committee for audit committee to scrutinize and then to note, and then it will go to executive and goes to full council. Now, one thing I would say here is glad to report that we haven't any breach. Breach means when we set the treasury management strategy and prudential code, i.e. the level of borrowing, the temporary measures, the operational limit. And if we go beyond those approved by the council, then we all have to report to the committee and to executive and full council. But right now we haven't breached any limit. And at the same time, we have to say is one of the question members always asks is what is our exposure in terms of external debt and whether we've got any risk, but we managed to fix most of those external debt when the rate of interest were low. And now there's an element which is left, but we know interest rate went up and it's coming down. So we'll try to see whether there's other opportunities to fix those as and when. But one of the things is we can't just borrow 2 years in advance because that is borrowing in advance of need. So we'll have to borrow close to the time when we're going to spend or to lend in terms of LAL or foreclosure home. But at the same time, we try to manage our cash flow. So we have what you call internal borrowing, and those internal borrowing, sometimes we borrow because it's cheaper for us to borrow internally rather than borrowing long term and keeping those investment in our bank account. So just to point out, I think my system is yeah. So those are the key things which I'm going to say. Now, in terms of the level of capital expenditure, we reported as part of the Q2, there's some project which have been reprofiled for next year. So as a result of those reprofiling, the borrowing will be less. And when the borrowing will be less, they will be lending less to some of the projects, like in terms of the debentures in the airport, some of the projects have been reprofiled. And that's what is reported. And then we'll take the next update will be the outturn, which will be reported around April time. So if there's any specific question, I'm happy to go through those specific questions, but my system is playing up as well. So.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions? Yeah, Councillor David.
Just got one. In light of the next item on the agenda, the valuation of the airport that seems to be coming up next, is that going to have any impact? Because it keeps going forward. So the valuation we're currently using for our airport, is someone going to say that ain't right and kind of affect this or revamp this? Do you understand what I'm kind of saying? Or is it not part of that?
But that's a fair question. So I think the valuation, when we talk about the level of debt for the council and our loan to the airport, which is in the region of $500 million, and we say, what is the value of the airport? And we say in the region of 1.4, 1.5 billion. So when we look at our exposure compared to the valuation of the airport is 1/3. So that's when looking at our lending and our exposure in terms of the risk. In terms of the treasury, it won't have any impact on the treasury. The treasury is the $500 million give and take, which we said we are going to borrow and lend. Those are the things already reflected here. So if the valuation move a couple of $100 million up or down, because it's based on a lot of technical things, which I'm sure Janet will take us through later, that won't have any impact on the loan. Because the loan is how much you lend and we're getting the interest. And right now, it won't have any impact on that loan level.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Underwood.
Thank you. Appendix A, the borrowing, the long-term borrowing is on a fixed rate. Does that mean that any interest rate movements in the next few years, we won't feel the effects of those?
Okay, that's another question. So if you look at our level of borrowing, I think our borrowing and the level of investment we've made in LAL, bulk of those has been fixed. So some of 10 years, some 20 years, some 30 years, some 40, some 50. So we look at our portfolio of our borrowing and we try not to concentrate the risk in 1 to 10 years. So we do balance that. If the interest rate goes up, those where we've already borrowed and we've already lent, or we already invested in our investment, let's say for some of the projects which we are doing, even the council projects, buying vehicles, waste vehicles, so those won't be impacted because we already borrowed. But the capital program of the council goes on, and there is still an element of investment which we're still lending to the airport. Those are the one, when we're preparing the 23-24 budget, we've already factored there will be an increase in the interest rate. So we try to manage and lock those rates when the time is right. And we did borrow 50 million because there is a HRA loan which is going to be renewed in February. So we can borrow slightly above because of that cash flow, but we can't borrow two years in advance. So we could have said, why don't borrow 200? Because when we borrow 2 years in advance, we carry that cost, because there's a cost of carrying that loan in our books. But going forward in the budget, we will address that if potentially is an increase in interest rate, which there is already now. So we're revising those rates.
Thank you, Underwood. Any more questions? No, thank you. Recommendation, the committee is recommended to approve for submission to full council and executive the mid-year report on treasury management for the half year ended 30th September 2022, which summarizes and reviews the council's treasury management activities along with changes required to prudential indicators for capital expenditure requirement and gross borrowings. Note that there has been now long-term borrowing 50 million between April and September 2022 as shown in Appendix A. Note that the council did not breach any of its prudential limits. Agreed, yeah? Thank you. Now I'm moving to agenda item 11, Luton Borough Council. Oh, sorry.
Apologies, Chair. In relation to agenda item 11, I have a personal and prejudicial interest, being a director of LAL, and I've also sought advice from the monitoring officer, and his advice is that I shouldn't be participating in this item.
Yeah, that's fine.
So is that okay if I can just leave?
Yeah, you can leave, yeah.
And I think that
Okay.
it's the same for Councillor Akbar as well, yeah.
Councillor Akbar as well, yeah. Yes. Financial statements for the financial year ending 31st of March 2019. Report from the external auditors is, I think, is Janet and her team. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Chair. So you've got in front of you 2 letters that we wrote to the Chair and then also to the Audit Committee members, which set out our position. We thought it was important to put on the record the position after the last Audit Committee meeting, so that it was absolutely clear in terms of what the commitments had been made in response to our report that we took to that meeting, and the potential consequences from our perspective. And then one of the objectives at the last meeting was that the Audit Committee members would have a regular update both from ourselves and officers as to progress, hence our second letter, which we sent and is on the agenda, which sets out, the progress that was and wasn't made against those commitments. You asked me at the last Audit Committee whether I thought that the original timescale that was set was achievable, and I said it was highly ambitious, and unfortunately it hasn't been achieved in full. There has been significant progress on a range of the issues that were needing to be looked at. However, we're not at a stage where we have a set of accounts yet that management have passed to us to finalise our procedures on, that reflects the full position on airport valuations and all of the related changes that were required to the accounts. There has been significant progress in the last week since we sent our letter. Valuations have been corrected and we have those now to look at. We have got the tax calculation and we have a meeting next week with the advisors who've provided that to look at that. And then, but clearly then all of the revisions to the accounts are still to be made to a satisfactory standard. And I would just say, and I think we did say this at the last meeting, you know, the position for Luton Borough Council Group is complex. You know, there are a lot of different elements, you know, that we're at probably the more complex end for any borough council in terms of its financial reporting due to the range of activities and its subsidiary and the amount of judgments, critical judgments and estimates that are included in those accounts. But we do remain, because it's so complex, we do remain seriously concerned about the current capacity and capability within the finance function. Now, I know that a lot of work has been done since we raised that in January, and efforts have been made to improve that situation. But I need to say that we still have serious concerns, and more needs to be done by the council to be able to respond to the challenge of financial reporting, given the complexity of your arrangements. And on that basis, I'll stop and take questions or let officers respond.
Thank you, Janet. Any questions from the members? Can ask Dev if you want to respond. Underwood, I come back. Underwood, you go first. It's all right. You go first, then Dev.
So in light of the fact that you've now received updated valuations and the other information, are you still going to write to the Secretary of State?
I may well do. Because my concern is, and I think, you know, there's been some very positive response from the council in response to this second letter. But my concern is that there needs to be some action pretty quickly to resolve this situation. And I'd like to see evidence of that rather than have more commitments that that may or may not be met before I make that decision.
So what do we have to do? What does the council have to do then in that short timescale?
Well, I think you should ask the officers what they can do, rather than me to tell you what you should do, because I've pointed out the risks that you're running around not having sufficient capacity and capability currently. You know, we've discussed a lot at this audit committee the backlog of financial reporting, that takes a lot of time and effort from the finance team, you know, away from, you know, running the complex nature of the business. So I am concerned that that's a huge pressure on them. And it also means that as auditors, we're focusing on the past rather than looking at what you're doing at the moment and being able to report, you know, more concurrently about where the risks and actions are that are being taken by the council. So, you know, the information that's coming from the finance and audit environment is not as helpful as it should be for members then to take a view on the running of the council. But I think maybe Dev perhaps should give you his response.
Thank you. Yes, Chairman.
Just on a similar one. So as we stand, have you got all the information? I know you're all concerned about the staffing, but basically you said you've got, so have you got all the information from us? Yeah.
I haven't got final financial statements that reflect the position. So I have the elements that were required, but I haven't got a set of draft financial statements that are complete that reflect that.
Thank you. Dev.
Okay, thanks, Janet. Thanks for the, yeah. So as mentioned in the letter, yes, we did our best to meet that deadline of 28th of October. So what we did in that time, we've got the full valuation carried out by Deloitte. So that was done, but quite rightly, the Janet teams has picked up a couple of areas which we took, but you have to remember it's 3 years valuation, so 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, and full based on risk. So that was done, but further discussion is taking place, and I think we are very close to resolving those things, but it's more with the EY valuation team and Deloitte valuation, because they took out the valuation for LAL. So I think we're very close to that. Then we also try to use that initial valuation and get PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is the tax advisor for LAL, to do the detailed deferred tax computation, because any revaluation gain has got impact on tax. So that has been done as well. So now there's a meeting next week, which with EY team and PricewaterhouseCoopers are meeting just to firm up those figures. So those are the main significant item in terms of the value. So that is quite critical, and quite rightly, we ourselves, the council and EY, would like to be comfortable with our advisors. Those figures are right. So we are close to that. It's just when you're talking about the airport was 1.4, 1.5 billion, just a little things in what we call a technical discount rate can float the figures up or down. Coming back to your answer, your question, Councillor, by 100, 200 million. So that's significant. So, but that's done. But one of the things I would mention here, that I did mention at the audit committee last time, and I think I did mention at FRG as well, we are talking about the group accounts. So absolutely, you have to get the group accounts right, but this doesn't have impact on the council financial position, i.e. it has got impact on the council budget or financial resilience. That's something different. Here we're just consolidating the subsidiary accounts with the council accounts. And the big part of that consolidation is that valuation. And quite rightly, there was other issues which we discussed at the audit committee. So there was, as mentioned, infrastructure assets. And that we said that was very much government and CIFA to issue the guidance, which they have now. So this is not just for the council, it's for the whole local government. Now we've got the guidance, so we've changed the accounts and we have to just get it passed through EY. But that guidance has given dispensation for all local government not to comply with what was originally suggested. So that is not just a council, it is all local government. Then there was another item which, when we discussed at the audit committee, there wasn't in the prior year about pension. That was resolved long time ago. So the point I'm making, we make significant progress, but maybe I was a bit overambitious to say, okay, we'll try to get it done. And the reason why I was trying to get it done by end of October, because right now we are flat out in the budget. And the whole team, everybody's consulting on the budget. So, and that was October, because November, December members are aware in January. Even we start the budget in August. So that I was trying to get it out of the year, but there has been a slight delay. And that's also despite our best endeavor to get external support as well. So we've employed Deloitte to help us with that. So quite rightly, Jayati has mentioned there's still some gaps. So we are going to address those. In terms of the staff, as county, my colleagues from county mentioned, recruiting is quite, and I'm sure my colleagues from EY as well will accept, is recruiting staff, not just in finance, but in quite a lot of profession is difficult. And we're experiencing that everywhere. Again, we've advertised the post for the closure accountant. We've interviewed, we've employed recruitment agency in central London. So the like of Pena, the like of Allen Lane. In fact, we did offer the job to one of the candidate, but of the 1 week, they decided to stay where they were. So the short-term measures, and that's absolutely our colleagues from UI saying, we are just having short-term measures. But the long-term is, I've discussed with the chief exec, is to say what is going to be a long-term measure and whether our offer is right or not. And in the short-term measures, again, these temporary measures, we've got agency staff, but with agency staff, we struggle because there's no continuity. They just can go. And we had quite four different agency staff over the 2-3 years while we were recruiting. We also had a restructure in the finance team where we created an additional post purely for the closure accountant. And that's what we're trying to recruit. We've already got John as the chief accountant, but he's been with us 1 year. So at least we are sort of comfortable and we are sort of quite in recruiting John. In the short term, we're also getting the support from Deloitte technical team. And they provided support, but there is some gaps which we still have to go and address. So these are short-term measures, but absolutely, as our colleagues from I said, we have to see long-term because we can't carry on having short-term measures in terms of having agency staff and relying on external to deal with some of the really complex issues. But one of the things I would say is hopefully is once the technical account, the complex issues is done, then hopefully it will give us some sort of template and base to build on the future year's account. I hope it's not going to be as complex. But the other thing is, as I've mentioned, is just to put it in context, is since April, we've dealt with 18-19 accounts, 19-20 audit, and 21-22 closure of accounts. So this will stretch any team, but we will do our best. But absolutely, I agree, maybe I was a bit too optimistic, and I wanted to, at least if October it was done, I can constrain the budget, but we'll do our best to make sure. And I said, as Janet mentioned, there's meeting taking place next week. So at least bring Deloitte and PricewaterhouseCoopers and the team just to, yeah, those are the significant items. I think we're very close to that. And then we have to, as Janet mentioned, there's areas which we have just to deal with some of the fine tuning and tidying up. So we'll do a final review and I'll ask Deloitte to do that, go to fine tooth comb and mop up if there's any small gaps. But the numbers in terms of what we call the primary statement, i.e. the income expenditure account, the balance sheet, those, the two significant items is the valuation and the deferred taxation. And if these resolve, the numbers shouldn't move, hopefully, and then we'll just bring everything together. And that's a bit takes time and it's an account which runs into 100 pages. So we'll have to do, but there has been some gaps and EY has highlighted to us, but we are very grateful and we all aim to get it resolved ASAP.
Do you want to respond, Dave? Yeah, carry on. Yeah, Dave.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. So, our EY and agreements, that's the two areas that you still need to resolve are the valuations and the tax liability. Is that correct?
The two areas where we'll have a significant impact on the numbers. So we're talking an airport valuation of 1.4 billion. So any minor sort of changes to the assumptions used by Deloitte and between EY team and Deloitte team, those can have a big impact. But I think we are close to that figure. And in terms of the other things is looking at the account itself. So when the numbers goes, then make sure that the numbers which are in the primary statement, like the balance sheet, the income expenditure, and the notes and supporting evidence, the notes in the accounts tie up. So it's a tidying up exercise which we'll have to do. And some of them, quite rightly, I pointed out, it doesn't agree. But the figures in the balance sheet, which will say, okay, all the primary statement give a true and fair view, those are the one where we'll be impacted by those evaluation. So those are numbers which are changing. Then once you make a change in 1 year, because of the nature of the change in 18-19, you have to change 17-18 accounts and 16-17 comparative figures. So basically, we are producing 3 sets of balance sheet, and that's what makes it complex. So it's not something which you do day to day, and even you employed somebody full time, it's very difficult to get that. And that's quite rightly, EY pointed out, due to the complexity of the council accounts, maybe you have to rethink. Maybe you have to get a resource which can deal with this level of complexity rather than buying from external. So there's a bit of tidying up to do. And there's a bit of, in terms of the disclosures, Janet mentioned, because a lot of things in the account is based on a level of judgment. So the valuation is judgment. So we have to disclose it properly, what judgment we've used to arrive at those valuation. So the more information we put is better for the reader of the accounts. And those are the things which will have to work with EY and just make sure there are areas where there's still at this stage some gaps to you. But in terms of the numbers, Janet will correct me if I'm wrong, those are the two significant items in the balance sheet. And those are the one which is top right. And we're close to hopefully to get a view from Janet's team by end of next week. Hopefully, I'm saying I'm being maybe over optimistic here.
Is okay, Andrew? You want to carry?
So yeah, so is that what EY's understanding of the position is as well?
Yes, so as Dev says, the valuation figures and then the associated changes that are required to the accounts are the most significant and the most complex to flow through. So the reason that the deferred tax position changes is because it changes within LAL's accounts when you change the valuation. That then flows through that set of accounts and then needs to be consolidated in, but it also then affects some reserves movements. The prior year adjustments that are required then go back 3 balance sheets and have to be disclosed and work through the notes that are associated with that. And then, as Dev says, actually being able to articulate through the accounts so that the reader can pick them up and understand, so what critical judgments and estimations have you done in here? Why have you got a prior year adjustment? What's changed in that? Where are the risks and uncertainties around that? And then all the other accounting matters that we've been discussing in terms of other functions of the accounts also need to be disclosed in there, and it needs to be internally consistent. And that's one of the fundamental problems that we've been having, which is that where a change has been made, it hasn't actually flowed all the way through. And so we've got a bit of a jumble of some points have been changed, but others which are affected haven't been changed to reflect those changes. And that's quite a piece of work, and that needs to be done into the final draft accounts that we're waiting to receive.
Are those inconsistencies a function of the fact that you're short-staffed, or is that part of the reasoning? The inconsistencies that have appeared between the.
I think what we try to do here is we've got Deloitte technical team. So we're talking about Deloitte, one of the top four working on those with us. But clearly, I think we were eager to get a set with all the, as Janet mentioned, the prior adjustment, the 3-year balance sheet and everything. And that eagerness, there are some gap there, yeah. But we are talking about some gaps. We're not talking 80-20 rule, probably 80% is there. There's 20% which needs to be done. So it's not, Janet will correct me, it's not the other way around, because we've got the prior adjustment layout, which in compliance with the accounting standard. It's just we have to work with Fruit to make sure some of the things tie up. But we've put those adjustments, and Deloitte's team has gone through that. So I'm going to contact them again early next week. And then we'll say, go for that with a fine-tooth comb again. Yeah. Because I personally, as I said, with the budget, is quite a stretch. So we'll ask them to do that again. And hopefully, if there's any things which is, as Janet teams highlighted, we'll concentrate on those areas more specifically. So yes, there are some areas, but there's, as I said, a lot of things which we discussed in the audit committee a while ago. We made very good progress on those. And the one which is the numbers is the valuation and deferred tax. And that's very close. Yeah. So we've got detailed 3 years. The valuation report run into 40, 50 pages. The taxation computation run into 15, 16 pages. So we are talking about complex things here. Yeah. And quite rightly, EY has to be comfortable because as our auditors, they will be signing off. But we are very close, and the figure which is produced so far is very close. But clearly, we have to make sure the whole thing stacks together. So I think 80% stacking is just that 20% which would have to make sure go and mop up and make sure it stacks up. So it's the test any reader can look at it and say, yeah, we understand that, we understand that. So I'm very positive in terms of the progress made, but clearly I wish we could have completed and over. For me, it will be one less things to deal with, but we are getting there. We're getting there.
Thank you. Robin, please.
Thanks, Chair. So just a couple of things just to note. And this is really kind of for members of the public. Because this is has been mentioned by Janice and by Dev. This is a very, very complex situation. What we're talking about, in essence, though, for members of the public, is that our airport company used to be valued at circa £580 million. And now, because we're taking a broader view, everybody is in agreement, both EY and also Lal's auditors, PwC, everybody's in agreement that the value of our airport company is now north of £1 billion. So substantially more than it used to be in our books. Where there has been disagreement has been about the precise nature of the discount rate, and that has an impact on whether it's circa square brackets £1.2 billion or £1.4 billion. Either way, it's a lot more than it used to be at circa £580 million. As Dev says, and as Janet, I think, is in the same place, we are almost there. And just to reiterate the point that the flow through of information doesn't make sense to do from an efficiency and effectiveness point of view until that valuation is bottomed out. So we're almost there, getting that valuation bottomed out. And then there's a commitment from our side that will get that flow through sorted so that the accounts are properly representative, and that will go through a proper QA process to ensure that what we present back to EY is a set of documents that are in a good place. Final point, just to add that we absolutely value the relationship that we've got with our audit partner, fully respect their opinion, and this has been a difficult process for all. As Janet said, we're at that difficult end, that complex end, but that's because we're doing so many things that are designed to ensure that Luton, which has been hugely impacted for over the last 12 years, just to remind members, we used to have circa £120 million in grant funding, down to circa £11 million. So we've done a lot of things as an organisation to drive commercial revenue, to be innovative, to ensure that we are able to maintain services for our public. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Robert. Councillor David.
Yeah, I had three. I probably got four. One of them was answered because I couldn't understand why we needed to go back to 2016, 2017. But they've just explained that. So that was on. When the word tax was mentioned, my ears pricked up. Would we be likely to be liable for tax then if this changing? When we say tax, do we mean tax that we might have to pay the government, or just that's the first?
Yeah. There won't be any corporation tax bill. Yeah. The way the revaluation works is if there's a revaluation gain, means potentially, if we dispose of the asset, we're not saying we're disposing the airport, so make it clear. But potentially, if you've got a gain, so an asset is worth, like a bit like if you've got your property and the property value has gone up. So potentially, if that goes up, you might end up having a capital gain tax if you're running a business. So then if you recognize that gain in your accounts, you have to recognize that potentially is a tax liability, and that's what we call deferred tax. So it's clearly linked with the gain. So if there's a gain, there's a deferred tax. So rather than representing the total gain, you will total gain less what is the potential deferred tax. So there won't be an impact on the corporation tax, no, because that corporation tax has been checked, paid, 1819 is done. We are not going to revisit that corporation tax.
The other one was, in the sense of if Ernst Young do send the letter to the Secretary of State or whoever it goes to, sorry, what implications are that for us in the sense of do we get someone suddenly come in and kind of take over, or what, and how does that help us, or do we get chastised by, do they send someone in? So have you ever done it in the past for other councils? That's my question. Thank you.
Experience on that.
So you'll probably be aware of some of the extreme cases where the Secretary of State has put commissioners into an organisation, and that's where there's a significant failure or breakdown in control or particular governance arrangements within the organisation. And that is not what we're talking about here, but what we are talking about is the need to address the lack of capability and capacity within the function, the finance function, and the period of time in which this has been an issue, and the difficulty that it will cause given the delayed audits to complete. I can't actually speak for the Secretary of State, therefore I don't know in this situation what they would do, but I think that their finance function that looks at overall performance within local government would probably give Dev and Robin a call at the least.
Just on that, in my non-financial logic, if we complete our one, because they're going to need to know that information, aren't they? What we're trying to get to, what we, the council, are trying to supply you with, albeit somewhat late, we're suggesting, due to staffing issues, we might say, and the fact that our airport is now a lot more financially complex. But they're going to need that information. So if we get you that information as the council, albeit late, that would, if you sent a letter now or then, that's the same information that people are going to want. So if you don't send the letter, but we get the information, we're nearly at the same place. Does that make sense?
I think if I interpret your comment as the requirement to produce your financial statements for each of the years that have not yet been done will never go away. So if you can't produce it to us and a higher authority is involved, they will be asking for exactly the same information. And in fact, we're contracted to provide you with an audit up to the year 2022-23. So Dev and I have a 5-year relationship, potentially, if it takes us a year, a set of accounts to get done before we've finished that off. So it's in all of our interests to move through that as quickly and as efficiently as possible. But the financial reporting responsibility for the organisation will not go away unless the Secretary of State decides to put in place some sort of statutory override for Luton, which I think is highly unlikely. So yes, somebody will need that information to be able to audit the accounts.
If I confused you, so my logic was if we continue doing what we're doing, albeit we're a bit late, and you don't send the letter, that gets us to that position. The other way is you send the letter and we're still going to have to get that same information to the Secretary of State. Does that make sense? Is that correct?
Yes, potentially they won't produce an audit of your financial. They might apply more pressure to the organisation to move faster on its actions to move through that backlog of financial reporting, or they might provide additional support. So this is the difficulty. In my responsibilities, that's one of the powers that I have if I have serious concerns, which may actually benefit the organisation. So to the question earlier about will I send a letter or not, actually that's one that I need some further discussion with officers about, as I said, the actions they're taking, some hard evidence as to what they're doing, and actually whether there's a benefit or not in doing that, because in some circumstances there may be.
Yeah, so if I was Luton Council hat on, I wouldn't want anyone from main government kind of getting involved because it looks like I've not done a good job, with the greatest respect. The other flip side, if they did get involved, they're then going to help us out. Yes and no. So I'm waffling. I'll forget why I said that. So
Thank you, David. Dev.
I think that's I understand as members of the council, as a council, we've got to sort of work for the resident of the place, Luton. I think what we have to take into account the journey we've gone through. Okay, 18-19 accounts before the pandemic was just close to getting signed. So that's how close we were. So audit was practically done, and we are talking about 18-19 accounts, which now we are discussing too. We are just there to get the account signed around February, end of February, and then we hit the pandemic. Once the pandemic hit, the Financial Reporting Council put a hold on all audit and accounts to be signed by auditors, private sector and public sector as well, because there's a big concern about whether companies or council will be a going concern or not. And I think members know we went through that process of demonstrating, and to our colleagues EY as well. So members are aware the council was very proactive, put an emergency budget. We wrote to deluxe, get the stabilization plan. So it was a journey. And those were to demonstrate to our external auditors that despite the pandemic, we've got a plan in place to make sure the council is a going concern. Yeah. So that was, and members are well aware that we put that there was a special force majeure with LAL. We had to deal with those complex issues, and that took time. And quite rightly, our colleague said, unless you demonstrate that the airport is stabilized and there is a special force majeure has been dealt with, which was done. I think I can't keep track of the dates now. I think it was back in November. After that, then we had to demonstrate that the council itself is going concern. So we demonstrated that we put our stabilization plan, we put our emergency budget, and we have to produce a cash flow which takes from the date of signature of the account 18 months in the future. That's how far we had to focus the financial resilience of the council. And working in a pandemic situation and with an airport, and that helped the airport is picking up, so which is very good news. Then after that, we came to the valuation. So the valuation itself was complex, and the valuation is very much based whether you are a pandemic or post-pandemic or pre-pandemic and where we are. So that valuation under the complex, and that valuation we're still discussing now. So that's another thing. And then after that, we had to look at how all these things have an impact on the complexity of the account itself. As I said, starting from the pandemic, doing the going concern assessment all along, making sure the airport is stabilized, having the special force majeure dealt with. Then on top of that, because we consolidated with the airport, there was a requirement, quite rightly from EY, for the 2021 accounts of LAL to be signed off by the auditors. So that's because they post-balance sheet event. So when you think all these complex issues, those things doesn't get dealt with tonight. So PricewaterhouseCoopers signed off the LAL accounts, I think I can't keep track about 3 or 4 months ago. So all these are things which, despite the 18-19, we call them in technical term events which took after the balance sheet date, but may or may not have an impact of the accounts, because when EY is going to sign the accounts now, it should take into account whether anything has happened which give readers a more up-to-date view. So when you put all these things together, this is probably one of the most complex accounts. But hopefully we all learn from that experience, and I don't want to go through that again. I don't want another pandemic or whatever, no special force majeure. So fingers crossed. So that's the journey. And coming back to your point, and when we are going to present our case is where we are. And of course, there is a gap in the technical side, and any such a complex account, there is a gap in technical side, which we are going to build on that. But when you put all these together, the journey we've gone through, it's quite, and that's at the same time preparing the budget, making sure we've got the budget, now dealing with the potential recession and dealing with inflation. It's just yeah. And we don't have sort of, yeah, Robin kindly, whenever I've asked for resources, he's always said yes. But sometimes going to get that resources is, yeah, you go out there, you put this, and yeah, it's a issue. Everybody, auditors as well are struggling to even do audit on time because there's a lack of resources. So generally, I think hopefully we'll have to come out of this and probably we get resources in not only just finance, but other sectors as well. We're struggling for resources. But I'm hopeful we are just close now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just one more then. It says on the bottom of the reply, LBC would strongly suggest that EY agrees to a face-to-face workshop with the council and other advisors so that issues can resolve quickly and efficiently. Is that what is happening?
We're waiting for the draft accounts.
I think, again, what happened here is on the two major issues, we're very much reliant, and Janet as well is relying on her technical team, like the valuers on EY, and we are reliant on our technical team as well, which is Deloitte for the valuation and PricewaterhouseCoopers for the deferred taxation. So one of the things for the request is if we make face-to-face, then the things which we can resolve quicker, more efficiently. So there's meeting taking place between EY team and Deloitte, and meeting taking place EY team and PricewaterhouseCoopers. So those hopefully, let's say, fingers crossed, is the last meeting we are having with the technical team. Once the technical team clear that, then they will give the reassurance to Janet as our external auditors, and our advisors will give reassurance to me as a Section 151 to say we're all in agreement now. If you can sign, and I'm sure Janet will be able to sign our audit report. Thank you.
So that face-to-face meeting should get the draft final statement to Janet. That's what we're saying, if I'm just using the words that you said.
Once the figures has been resolved, that's our best endeavor. Then we put the figures there, and as I said, there is an area of doing a, as Robin mentioned out there, a final quality assurance, that really fine-tooth comb, making sure the full stop, the graph, and the comparative figures, some of the things, really detailed quality assurance to make sure everything stacks up, and then we'll send that to our colleagues, Janet.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. I have just one question, Deb. I think, David, just the last one, you gave him clarity. In just footnote, straight question, like what Ernst & Young, they ask you, we have long conversations, you know, the meetings and everything. What's left now? Just the financial statement and the figures you just mentioned?
Yeah, so what left now, I'm sure Janet has already explained. So in terms of the numbers in the accounts, that's the one which is really anybody will be looking at. The first thing they will say whether the numbers stacks up or whether the numbers are reasonable in the primary statement. And those two big numbers which will change is the valuation and deferred taxation. We've already put some already, but subject to what the final figures then will change. So we've already done some preliminary work in terms of the valuation is X, what is going to be the deferred taxation, what is going to be the prior adjustment. So we've done a mock already, but the final figure will firm up those. Then we've got, as I say, just tidying up. Just if there are things which stacks up, make sure everything gets together. But in terms of the numbers, when anybody looking at it, say whether the numbers on the balance sheet and the P&L is robust and accurately given true and fair view, that's where those two key numbers, and that's where we're just hopefully we'll get a view. But I'm sure why we'll go through their own quality assurance and making sure they're comfortable and go for their own process. But I think from a technical team, we are close for both technical team to agree in principle on those numbers, and then EY will go for their own process to get the review and quality assurance done from their side. And then we will be working on tidying. Some of the colleagues from EY team has mentioned these are the things, Dave, you have to revisit that, and we'll take it back to Deloitte to say, look, these are the things who are missed. And quite rightly, there are things which were missed, and it looks at the Deloitte team to revisit that and go for fine-tooth comb to make sure we deal with all the remaining few gaps which are left.
Thank you. Any more questions? Just do some recommendations and then I come back on my point. The committee is recommended to receive the external audit of financial statements for the financial year ended 31st of March 2019 and make any comments they seem fit and note the LBC response to EY letter dated 28th of November 2022 on 2018-19 statement of account. As members knows, like we having these discussions from long time, meetings and everything. I think in COVID, we have very difficult times, councils, like other council, our council have. And I do appreciate the officers, financial departments, what they're working towards 18, 19 audits and EY. And it was a long list and they're working hard and I think we are nearly there, not very far. So does committee think we can give some more time to financial department and they can sign off accounts 18, 19?
Because Deb's going to do that. I suppose the sticking one is what EY do, but that's down to EY
Yeah.
correctly so because they're our auditors.
Yeah, I think, yeah, we nearly did. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Yanboy, and see you next meeting.
Everybody, thanks.